Welcome to another episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name's Nick Ponte. I'm here with my co-host, Stephen Clark.
How are you doing, Nick?
I am excited to introduce another guest today. This is somebody I lined up, and one of the reasons is because I'm really interested in, I was trying to find out some secret tips about how Jack Gallagher of West End Lettings has built his business to 720 properties, I think it was. So huge letting agents in Glasgow, predominantly in the West End, but massive experience as well. So I was trying to kind of pick his brains about how to build a business to get to the point where he can take 3 months off a year. So
yeah, he's a knowledgeable guy. He started out at, just after the crash in 2008 and built up his letting agent. Probably a difficult time, an opportunist time as well. But yeah, he stood the test of time, and 13 and a half years later, he's still going strong, and he's now got plans to kind of grow it and scale it even bigger. So it's quite good to see.
Yeah, so I think there was one interesting thing that I kind of picked, well, a few interesting things, obviously, but one of the things is that he doesn't focus on like investor, like professional, like landlords, investors that we deal with day in, day out. He just goes for the more kind of like, they have one property, they've bought it and maybe been passed down the family, they're emotionally attached to it. Typical kind of West End sort of grand properties as well. So it was quite interesting seeing the other side of it. And we talked about COP26, the massive demand in rental properties in Glasgow. Was that increase in rent prices going to sustain going into 2022? Get his view on that. We talked about the changes in legislation. Is that having an impact on landlords exiting the market? All these things that we talk about. And basically what a ball ache it is to run a letting agency. So we'll just cut to the interview with Jack Gallagher. Okay, so I'm delighted to welcome Jack Gallagher from West End Lettings on the Scottish Property Podcast. How are you today, Jack?
I'm great, thanks. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks very much for coming on. So, Jack, obviously, you're based in Glasgow. You've got West End Lettings, which, I mean, you've been running for a long time now. Loads of experience in the lettings industry. A lot of our listeners are landlords, so we're hoping this will bring our listeners a good bit of value. But can I just start by asking you, a little bit about your background? What got you into actually becoming a letting agent?
Well, I had no real experience. I started the business in 2008. Kind of off the couch, been on the couch for quite a while at that point, actually. And yeah, I'd been a landlord in the past. I'd had properties in Glasgow and elsewhere, actually, when I lived down in England. And I'd used letting agents, and it's just something that had been on my mind. I'd came a cropper really badly once with a letting agent in England. And I think anyone who's had a few properties here and there and used letting agents has probably come a cropper at some point. I just thought maybe it was something I could handle. So I didn't know. I wasn't thinking I can easily do this.
What job did you do before you kind of started considering this? What were you originally?
Well, at that point, I was unemployed. I'd worked a lot of, most of my life, I worked as a software developer. I used to work, I worked in consultancy, and then I worked as a freelance developer for about 15 years, and mainly in oil and then investment banking. I used to write kind of very specific kind of risk models, risk measurement models for investment banks. I gave up doing that in about the millennium, about 2000, and then I didn't really do much until 2008 when I started West End Lettings.
So obviously 2008, I mean, this 2008 rings a bell here. Something quite significant happened in 2008. So just give us a little bit about how the market was at that time then, for those younger listeners who don't remember the great financial crash.
Yeah, I mean, it was in the aftermath of the crash, and I think that was part of my, I wasn't being clever or anything about it, but I could see that there was a lot of reluctant landlords out there. There was an awful lot of you know, there was a big surge in rental properties, rental stock. But there was also a big surge in letting agents. I remember reading somewhere at the time that, or after the time, that the number of properties had doubled within a few years, but the number of letting agents had trebled.
I was actually going to say that. That must have been a very difficult time to start a letting agent, because I remember quite vividly a lot of the local estate agents in my area that I invest in all of a sudden became letting agents as well, because they couldn't sell any flipping properties, but they thought, well, we'll manage properties. And it was like this switch overnight. They all just started kind of dual listing. So I'm assuming it was a difficult time to start.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, a lot of big, like Clyde, for example, in Glasgow, not naming any names, other estate agents do exist and all that, but they suddenly started doing lettings. And I think the thing is, it's always going to be a hard time to be a letting agent. You know, to start a letting agency isn't, you know, it's just that there's low barriers to entry. There's, you know, so many people in the market. It's always going to be tough, you know. It was but the point was that there was a lot of reluctant landlords. There were a lot of landlords out there that were shopping on price. So if you were coming new to the market with 0 properties under management and you were offering a cheap package for landlords, you were going to get some action, although it did take a while. Yeah, especially that question when people say, how many properties do you actually manage at the moment?
Well, I was going to ask that, so you might as well answer it right now.
Yeah, of course I started with 0. I mean, I didn't start with my own portfolio. I'd sold all my properties at that time. So yeah, 0 properties. So that was a tough question when landlords actually, you know, if they were thinking of coming on board and then they were like, and it happened. So how many properties have you got? They could tell you were a newbie and then go, how many properties are you managing at the moment? And 0 was a tough thing to say.
How many properties do you manage now?
720.
Right, okay. That's good numbers. Yeah, so I'm like that. Yeah, I've got a long way to go yet. Long way to go. So no, I mean, that's really interesting. I think I heard that you were trying to position yourself a little bit, like obviously new to the market. You're like, what can I do differently here? So what kind of thing did you do differently to try and attract those initial clients then?
Yeah, there's not much. Well, the one thing we did was we tried to focus in the West End. So get that, like, try and be like ultra niche, you know, focus on West End. We didn't do much in the way of any kind of marketing. It was, you know, ads on Gumtree. I mean, we've evolved since then, but the other thing we did was obviously doing refurbs for people. So I would go to private landlords that had properties that were in a state and had no money and they were wanting to let them out, and I would just say, well, look, I'll fund the refurb. So that was the kind of one trick pony that we were for the first 3 or 4 years. You know, I would spend sort of 10 or 20 grand of my own money on their refurb and then recover it from rent. So that was how we got most of our early clients. And actually, a lot of those reluctant landlords that had no money knew other reluctant landlords that had no money. And so we got referral business through that. So that's how we got traction really in the early years, just by doing that, just by paying for people's refurbs and charging no money up front and cheap fees.
And I guess that back then you were saying there was a flood of rental properties because, you know, people couldn't sell them and that. But I guess that a lot of people were kind of trapped as well because they were, you know, in negative equity as well. So, you know, they couldn't refinance, etc. So that was really the only option they had, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that happened to us was we had a bit of an exodus in about 2012, 2013, when all those reluctant landlords suddenly came into positive equity and dumped their property. So we actually went negative for about 6 months in 2012-13.
That's interesting. Yeah. And obviously I'm really interested, like, you know, in business, just in business. Let's kind of get away from the property side of things, you know, and you've said you're up over 700 properties now. You know, you've been doing this a long time, so you don't get there overnight to get 700 properties. But was there a point where, you know, in your career or the time that you've been building this business where you were struggling? You know, what were the hard times? was there a point where you got where things just exploded? Can you pinpoint any specific kind of game changers for you?
There's never been such a thing. It's been I've got a graph of properties under management each month for 13 and a half years, and it's just like a slightly up steepening line. So we're accelerating all the time, but not by much. There's never been any sort of breakthrough moment or eureka moment. And obviously, as we pick up, become more professional, more capable, we've become, average price rather than just ultra discount letting agents. So that's, we don't get people shopping on price anymore.
What about your first hire? I mean, surely, at the start you were doing everything yourself, going around, which is the stage that I'm pretty much at the moment, stressed out my box. Was that a kind of a relief to get on your first member of staff, or was that just an added stress in itself?
It's different, you get a little bit of time when you start hiring, but you just get other problems. But it's a journey, that was interesting. Now it's, that's been a big part. I'd say that's been the most interesting part of the whole thing. The whole experience has been learning about recruiting and identifying people that will work well. I mean, we've got just the most incredible team now. Everyone loves it. They love their job.
Yeah.
And that makes them great.
That must be quite hard to find, as the right people in lettings, because you guys are passionate about starting a letting agent, but letting agents are like, they must be like the most hated flipping people, because you can't win from the landlord and you can't win from the tenant ever. You're always the one that's getting hit from both sides yet, and you're surely got to be like the referee in the middle just constantly.
No, that's right. I mean, we are. We're not really agents. We're mediators. It's like you're just. It's a mediation role, and
social workers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this job is, people say, well, how long will it take me to learn to be a letting agent? And I'm like, forever. You're never going. It's like, that's the other thing. Goes back to one of your other questions, but yeah, I mean, estate agents say, it's great because you don't care who the client is. There's the keys. Give us your £500,000 and that's it. The job done. Transaction. You don't care who the buyer is. You don't really care who the seller is. Once they're gone, you're on to the next deal. With this, everybody's pretty much forever. And you don't make two people happy. You make two people kind of uncomfortable with each other. That's in that sense, you're an agent. You're intermediating between two people with conflicting objectives. So it's a tough gig, and it's hard to. I'd say a lot of my focus over the years has been trying to build an environment and a kind of ethos where people can find a way to be comfortable talking to the clients, being open and honest, and being comfortable with that as well. Because that's difficult, people assume, just call you a liar, straight out. You're lying to me about broken boiler. Do you think I'm a mug? Need a new boiler. We had one of them a couple of weeks ago. A guy's like, "What? Do you think I was born yesterday? I need a new boiler."
That was the that was the landlord, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the landlord.
Yeah. And what would you, just while we're on this, what would you say is the most challenging part of, lettings in general? What kind of specific kind of issues are the hardest things to deal with?
I mean, emotionally, it's definitely dealing with landlords that are cash strapped, and then you're intermediating between an angry tenant with some issues and a cash strapped landlord who actually can't afford to repair them, doesn't want to. I mean, that is kind of intractable and more common than I'd like it to be.
And you're just, and you're that the middleman basically who's trying to get a good, outcome for everybody. But obviously, your hands are tied sometimes. So, So you'd mentioned there before, Jack, you invest in property yourself as well. Have you got a buy-to-let portfolio or no?
No, I haven't. No, I had property when I bought property when I was really young, actually. I was listening to your Jim Parker podcast the other day, but yeah, longer ago than that even.
Right.
No, I bought property straight after uni, my first property, and I was at that time. I was like, I'm into this. I'm going to buy property, and I did buy some more and picked up a few more, but I never had more than 5 or 6. And then for some reason, I just wanted out. It was actually because I was a crap landlord, and I'd been burnt by letting agents. And then I just thought, well, I'm not using a letting agent. I'd rather just put tenants in and then go travelling and then let them not pay the rent for a year than use a letting agent. It was that, and I'd had too many experiences of sort of brushes with dodgy letting agents, and then my own incompetence at being a landlord. I just sort of started selling up and ended up. Fortunately, it seems like I was like a genius, because by 2006, I'd got out, sold all my properties, and then the crash happened. But it was just serendipity, really. It wasn't foresight. And since then, I've never really fancied it. I mean, I think it's still, especially now, I think, well, maybe not right now, but since, after the crash, I think I would have done it, but I just didn't want to distract myself,
Yeah. So do you invest in Bitcoin then? Is that what you're telling us?
No.
No.
Equities.
Right. Stocks and shares. Yeah. Okay, no worries. Well, we don't know anything about that, so moving on. I think that it was interesting though, because obviously, like, if you look at, there are quite a lot of letting agents that do come from a kind of, landlord and background, and then obviously they set up their own agency, and then they obviously help other investors, which is what I do. That's predominantly my focus, is helping other property investors build portfolios, and then obviously I manage them. But with yourself, I get the sense, I don't know, you're going to tell me if I'm wrong, but are you kind of aimed more, I don't know what to call it, the retail market, or the kind of like the accidental landlords, or is that kind of where more your focus is?
Well, that's what's happened. We didn't sort of target that, we targeted the West End. I think over the years, we've got, we do more marketing with these consultants. And so you've got to define your avatar. And our avatar is the emotionally attached landlord. So, but that's kind of happened. That's the way it's evolved. Over 90% of our landlord clients have got one property. 93%, I think, have got one property, and they're very attached to it. Most of them, it was a property they lived in for a large part of their life, and they now live with a partner, or they live in Hong Kong or London. Most of our clients don't live in Greater Glasgow. Over 60%. Over 60% live in the UK outside Glasgow. And
that brings us on to your kind of your motto then, isn't it? You do one thing well. I saw that on your LinkedIn. So just explain a little bit about what that is then.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always stuck to that. I mean, it's something. I like that idea. I think, if you want to be good at something, you've got to focus on it. That's true. But also, I think in the way the world is going, everything's becoming much more transparent. People are looking for niche players, like when you want a wedding photographer. You want a wedding photographer, you don't want a photographer. And I think that it's getting that way for everything now. You go on Amazon or wherever, you shop online, or you just buy you try and buy, people are trying to buy exactly what they want now. If it's a choice between a general photographer or a wedding photographer, you want a wedding photographer, or a baby photographer, whatever you want a photo of. And it's the same for everything, cars, and I think people are heading that. We win a lot of clients that come to us and say, I picked you because you only do lettings. and the thing is, as you grow, that temptation is always there to move into sales or factoring, development, sourcing, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And I think there's more than one way to skin a cat. I think that idea about going out and going, oh, we want to be a one-stop shop, you know, source the properties, refurb them, manage them, you know, whatever. There's certainly people out there, you know, especially overseas investors, and that's all they want, and we lose that business to you. But the other side of it as well is I quite like the idea of focus. I quite like, you know, having, I mean, it's still unbounded, the learning that we've got to do. And the, you know, that's the thing about, my take on lettings is, one of your other questions was, why does everyone hate them? You know, and I think part of the reason everyone hates them is more because they are crap. And they're crap because it's really hard. As you know, you've got to be like everything, you know, a scientist, and, you know, it's like almost any small business, you know, you've got the HR and everything else, but also you've got to be a bit of a philosopher, an accountant, a lawyer, you know, a good mediator, everything. And then it's quite technical. Yeah, and anything goes wrong at all, it's your fault. So you take a lot of blows, and there's a lot to know. There's a lot to go wrong, and it's over a long time. It's hard to get yourself out of a difficult situation. So I think that's one of the reasons I like specializing, is because we knock the rough, go constantly knocking the rough edges off, and just refining processes, get better and better and better. And whenever anything goes wrong now, we're immediately on it. You know, the next morning, everyone gets together and we're like, right, what could we have done? And we just change it. We just change it right there and then, and that's not happening again. And we do that every single day, you know?
Yeah, that's great. I love I love that chat about systems and processes and all that. I always love that stuff in business, because, you know, if you just get that nailed, you know, and then you can learn from your mistakes and then create a process or procedure where it just doesn't happen again, and you tweak it so that, you know, you're improving all the time. Absolutely love that chat. It's brilliant. So the sales, yeah. So you must have been tempted. You know, you see all these guys driving about the West End, you know, their Porsches and all that. You know, these estate agents that are absolutely minted at the moment. You must have been tempted at some point, you know.
I can't say no, because I was once. I nearly did it, but I'm glad I didn't. That's for sure. And most of the time, I've not felt like that. There's that thing about nail it before you scale it that they say, you know, in Silicon Valley, and I feel I kind of believe that, you know. I think that's, and we're never going to nail it. You can't nail this. It's far too complex.
Yeah,
and
it's always changing.
Goalposts are constantly moving, and it's tough. It's tough to just do it, and then it's really tough, as I'm sure you know, to make a profit doing it.
I mean, I say to people, you know, like when they ask me about that question, you know, you never really get your tenants phoning you up in the morning saying how wonderful the property is and how delighted they are with your service. Do you know what I mean? Whenever you take a phone call first thing in the morning, or a text or an email, it's just basically you're getting bombarded with a complaint or a problem or a boom. That's it. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
We've started doing surveys with a Survey Monkey with our landlords, which is good, because then you're not, you know, it's like you say, normally everyone's kind of people are just contacting you when there is a problem, but maybe they're out there and they're actually happy, but they're not going to phone you up and tell you that. So that's what we've started doing that, and that's quite you know, quite uplifting actually, to just reach out to people and say, how are we doing? And they say, oh, no, everything's fine. It's great.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work. We get a lot of that now. We send them out every month to landlords and tenants. So maybe you have to look.
You have to look and try and get a bit of praise. And I do that with the Google reviews, like with the tenants, when they move out, I always send them a wee link to the Google review. And that does give you a wee uplift, you know, when they leave a nice review. But Okay, so let's talk about current market. Obviously, you guys have got a team. You're in there day in day out managing. Well, West End predominantly, but I mean the West End's where the madness is, as far as I could see, because I had a couple of properties that came on, and it was just absolutely ridiculous over the last couple of months. So tell us what happened. Like, coming out of lockdown in the last sort of, I don't know, what, 3 to 4 months. What exactly happened with this? Created this huge demand and the mental increases in rent that we saw?
Well, I think it was it was not one thing. And the one thing I would say is the increases in rent are not caused by exploitative landlords. They've been driven up by market forces. There's an imbalance. Somebody famous, market commentator in Wall Street, and people would say, why are prices going up? And he would say, that's because there's an excess of demand, more buyers than sellers. And that's what happened. Yeah. But why, all the reasons that fed into that, I mean, the post-COVID thing, the return of students in greater numbers, everyone, potentially holding back properties for COP. Even if they weren't holding back properties for COP, they were renting properties. I mean, there's probably only 50,000 rental properties in Glasgow, and a few thousand of them were used by COP delegates, at least a few thousand, 40,000 delegates.
Did you have any landlords yourself? Because I didn't have anybody really that switched over to getting the quick buck from the COP26. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have that. Did you?
We had a lot of people asking, because we had tenant serving notice in the run up to COP, and our landlords would say to us, would you rent it out for COP and manage that for us? And we just said no, because
too much.
We don't do that. We at least do one thing well played into our hands at that point, because although there's some people have an office opposite us that do Airbnb, but we didn't. It's true, actually, we didn't see a lot of evidence of it among our landlords. A few people asked. There were a few of our landlords that were actually selling their properties at that time, and they hadn't got a buyer yet, so they put them on for COP26. But I'm not aware of any that, between tenants, just took them off us and let them out for COP26 and then gave them back, or anything like that. So I didn't see it a lot.
I've seen some ridiculous demand, and for properties in Glasgow. I think Nick was saying as well, he had to switch his phone off after 100 inquiries after a couple of hours and stuff like that. Were you getting a lot of that as well?
Yeah. We were getting, because we've got a thing we apply online. We were getting 150, 200 applicants for properties overnight. But there was just nothing available. That's the thing. Housing, it's essential. People were going homeless in Glasgow. Students.
What would that be like in normal times then, to kind of put a bit of perspective on the numbers?
Well, we're talking about August, September there, really. Normally it's quite hot in the West End in our market, August and September. And normally we'd be getting, a lot of applicants. If we put a nice 1-bedroom flat on the West End in August, we might get 10 or 20 applicants overnight, but not 200.
Yeah, that's a huge increase, isn't it?
And yeah, but it's just that people were using a scattergun approach to finding a property. There's anything.
Because the lack of stock.
Yeah, so it's just no stock.
And have you seen that change in the kind of the recent months?
Yeah, so 2 months ago, or even 1 month ago, we had nothing available pretty much constantly, and we'd be putting properties on every day, at least, roughly 1 or 2 a day, either new properties or relets, and we'd be getting 50 applicants within an hour or two, and then we shut down, and it was just constantly like that. Now we've got 10 properties on our website that are available with less than 50 applicants.
Right. So it's back right off, yeah.
Yes. I'd say it's reverted. Well, remember, this is normally a pretty slack time of year as well. We're still renting a lot of properties. We'll see what it's like. It's got to go quiet in December, but whether it'll just be an even bigger surge in the beginning, the second week of January, I don't know. But
yeah, but I still don't understand where all these people like went to like over the last kind of like, I would say within 4 weeks. If you're saying now that you're not getting as many inquiries, like all these like 50 to 100 people that would inquire on the first day, did they all just get properties? But surely they didn't, because we had COP26 and there wasn't anything available. And
yeah, it started calming down before COP. I guess if I had to make up a theory for that, I think a lot of the demand was students. And so what's out there, probably a lot of students are maybe crowded into flats that they shouldn't be in. And I think a lot of students went to places that they probably wouldn't have wanted to go to, like Clydebank and East End.
Yeah, right, okay.
I've seen a lot of that.
So there's been that there's been that ripple effect to the outer parts of the city then, right? Okay. So that's interesting. And I mean, I read in CityLets, I think the latest Q3 report was like rents up in Glasgow 10%. So what do you think that can't sustain? Can it surely going into 2022?
Yeah, I think there will be a bit of reversion, because that was, I mean, it's a wee bit misleading. So, the city, I don't want to diss CityLets data, but, they're saying the average rent in Glasgow is £928 a month at the moment across all properties. And what that's just drawn from properties that have rented on their portal in the last quarter. So, our average rent is well below that, and we've got a lot of expensive stock. So it's going to be a reversion from current levels back to normal levels. I mean, our average rent is about £840, and they're saying the average rent of properties which are renting at the moment is £928 per month. So yeah, there's going to be a bit of reversion, I would say, definitely, from that 10%. And I mean reversion, not like a decrease in the increase. Rents are going down. I would predict. Oh, bloody hell. We'll see what happens. People will be watching this and tell me I was wrong.
That's all right.
Can we edit that
No.
out?
We're holding you to account. No, definitely. We've got you on record now, Jack. We are going to stick this out as a soundbite for 2022 predictions. So I think that the other big thing that a lot of like our investor clients are asking is, there's been a lot of kind of headlines in the press recently about the Scottish Green Party getting into government, and one of their big things is rent controls. So, as a managing agent, letting agent, who you're dealing with tenants a lot of the time, you're seeing people struggling to get places to rent. You're seeing prices, getting, increasing. What is your view? Is there a need for rent controls in Glasgow?
But personally, I don't believe in introducing market distortions anywhere. And you don't need to be an economist to understand that. I mean, and rent controls in particular, I'm not aware of any successful rent control experiments. They've done it. Well, they did it in Britain, and that was a disaster. They still do it in a lot of bits of America. New York, it's a disaster. It never really works. And I think that the problem with it is it's so hard to design it. Like everything else, the market for secondhand cars is just left alone, and it takes care of itself. Yeah. If there's a shortage of supply, the price goes up.
Nobody's going to Tesco and saying we're going to cap the price that you can charge for a loaf of bread. Do you know what I mean? This is the argument I get all the time. People come on my social media and say, but it's a basic human right to have a roof over your head and a home. Yeah, but so's like eating. Do you know what I mean? So's getting like your food and having your dinner, but nobody's price capping the supermarkets. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's maybe in the social sector where people are maybe on benefits and that it's important that people are not exploiting, taking advantage, that sort of thing. But I would say the majority of properties you're dealing with in the West End, the ones that I had on in the West End, I was seeing people that were either on very high salaries who could afford it, or else they were getting funded by the bank mum and dads as students who had plenty money.
I mean, I think that that kind of Green Party and SNP sort of left wing. I mean, it's predicated on the idea that the prices are being driven up by exploitative landlords. So as soon as you have that as a concept, then maybe price controls seem like a lever that you should pull, or rent controls. But to me, it's just misguided. I mean, we're seeing tenants bidding up rents more than landlords, and that's what happens in London. The price is being bidded up by the imbalance between supply and demand. It's not, I mean, landlords are, okay, they're rent seeking, funnily enough, they want to maximize their unearned income, but they're taking part in a very liquid market. I mean, if you're a landlord out there and you want £200 over what the market will stand, your flat's going to be empty. And there's landlords out there, especially private landlords, that will leave the flat empty for a year because they're daft. And the market allows them to do that. I mean, I think the damage, I don't want to, the problem with rent, it's like communism generally, it seems like a good idea, and actually it's horrific.
That's
you're going out to try and do something to meddle in a market to make it better, and what you do is you bring about misery.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to happen when they bring rent controls in. That's it. Simple as that.
100% set up to fail, but let's see what happens. So you've said that, obviously, you've said in this interview that 90% of your landlords, have one property. There's a theory out there that obviously with the latest introduction of tax changes, extra kind of red tape for landlords and all this is going to kind of make the market more focused on the kind of professional landlord who's the portfolio landlord, that sort of thing. Have you seen landlords selling up because of this?
Personally, no. We people are talking, have been for some time talking about incorporating, to try and avoid some of the tax. I think there's still quite a few landlords out there that are not aware of Section 24, and
they probably will be now this year. It was like phased in, but I think when they get their tax return done by their accountant, they'll be like, what the hell?
I mean, obviously there's, all of that is true. Definitely the smaller landlords, amateur landlords, accidental landlords are being at the margin driven out of the market by all of these regulatory pressures and increases in taxation, which don't affect businesses to the same extent. And there's going to be there is a general move, towards bigger professional / institutional investors and, corporations, banks and other businesses that want to move into the private rent sector has been set up. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Build to rent, obviously, it's going to become a big thing. And I can see, I think in 1,000 years, there's not that private landlord thing's not going to be there. Maybe even in 100 years. I think that's the direction of travel. I don't see that going backwards. And all of the legislation, all of the taxation has been kind of you know, edged towards favouring, you know, corporate institutional type investors and even build to rent.
I don't know. Looking at the kind of your single landlords as well, I'm kind of thinking as well that, you know, people kind of start to say that Section 24 will have a huge impact on it, but if you've got an accidental property you've kept a holiday or something, you're just, you know, a one property landlord, and you really notice the difference in your tax salary. If you're, you know, if you're earning a salary 30, 40 grand a year and you submit a tax return for it, you're probably not giving a shit if you don't make an extra couple £100 a month, a year over that property. It's probably for your pension pot or on a repayment mortgage, pay the mortgage. They've probably got different aspirations. So you're probably right. You're probably not going to think about it in more detail. Yeah, you think that people would sell it, but do they really care if they're still making a salary or still working? And that one property isn't really making them an income. It's just something in the background.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the key thing is at the margin. At the margin, you know, they're more likely to sell to get out the market. You know, it's not a big. It's not. I think those a lot of our landlords, for example, emotionally attached landlords, a lot of them, they're hanging on to their property for nostalgic reasons or emotional reasons, and sometimes practical reasons. I mean, if someone in their 30s goes to work in Hong Kong, they rent out the flat their mum bought them when they went to uni, you know, and at the back of their mind, they're thinking they're probably going to come back to that flat in, you know, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years, and a lot of them do. I think that's, you know, that's whether the market is made so unpalatable. The prospect of being a single property landlord is made so unfriendly for them that it makes them jump that hurdle of just getting rid of the property that they would have preferred to just kept because they've got an emotional attachment to it.
I mean, I suppose in that, but if thinking about it from that person that's got the one property, if that property is washing its face, the rental income's covering the costs and, you know, the management costs, and it's completely taken care of by a good letting agent, you know, and it pays for the compliance and any maintenance that crops up. If you look at the property prices that went up in Glasgow, obviously in the last year at 8%, if they're looking at their 100 grand flat going up to 108, they're going, well, I've made 8 grand on it. You know, it's washing its face constantly. It's kind of a high interest savings account that's kind of grow an asset that's just appreciating in value.
There's a few people.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
That's true. But what happens if property prices start going down?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get my head around like because it's always a different network and people that we're speaking to. Your agent's based completely on or a lot of it single, you know, landlords with single property, and you would think that market would be dying out, but you're saying no, and I'm thinking, you know what, you're probably right. Why would it die out? Why would it go away if they've got one and it's washing its face and it's going up in capital value to a certain extent? We think about it as professional landlords with, you know, a portfolio and a personal name that Section 24 is hitting us hard and we have to make changes. But if they're working a full-time job at one property, do they really care?
I mean, I suppose I don't actually know. The question is here, is are landlords being driven out of the market at the margin? And I mean, I've certainly seen evidence of that. You know, people...
it's maybe making the entry level a little bit more difficult to get into with, you know, compliance, and now that people are more aware, and obviously with information age where people can look up stuff and get more educated on before going in. So it might prevent the single landlord, the property landlord, entering the market from now on. But I don't see why I would force them to exit.
Yeah.
I think the one of the things that I hear quite a bit is when people want to then purchase another property, then they're like, oh, I didn't realize I get hit with 4% ADS, and then that's the kind of, oh, I'll need to sell this flat now. Do you know what I mean? Because
yeah, I think ADS. Well, I mean, 4% is quite tough. I think it probably impacts the sales market as well, you know, more than lettings. But it's just there. It's just one of the barriers. I mean, the question here we talk around. I don't know if anyone's done a survey to see if the number of rental properties in England or Scotland has gone down over the last year. I mean, we see landlords exiting, we see landlords coming in, but net, what's happening? I don't know. actually don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you said about the institutional investors and that, John Lewis, Lloyd's Banking, etc. That's going to be a big thing for the future. But moving on from that one, Jack, right? I'm listening to one of your other podcasts there that you did recently, and you said that you get 3 months off a year. So I'm thinking to myself, 3 months off a year, this guy's got it nailed. What do I need to do to get to that level, Jack? Tell me, how do I need to build my business? So first of all, what do you do in that 3 months off a year? And have you got any advice to me as a letting agent that's just started up to try and get to that point?
Well, I think I haven't had 3 months off in the last year, that's for sure. And I mean, I did do that. I did a lot of, sailing was the thing. I used to do a lot of climbing, and just generally traveling and sailing. For the past sort of 7 or 8 years, certainly done 3 months a year, mainly sailing. And the last trip was just before lockdown, to Mexico. But I think it's good actually we don't do 3 month trips. We tend to do like 4 or 5 weeks at the most, 2 or 3 times a year. And I think it's great to try and have a business that you can leave for a month. And because I've always spent a lot of time just doing nothing, I've tried to design the business around me doing nothing. So as soon as I kind of figure something out, a new process, I just document it, add it to our systems, and I don't do it anymore. Obviously, you need a great team to be able to do that. Yeah. But I think it is a great, I've just done that through laziness more than anything else, to be honest. But I know that I've read all these business books. People say, "Oh, that's what you should do." I was lucky because that's what I've always done. But I never had a problem with delegation. As soon as I can
outsourcing, getting the right team. That's what it's all about. So tell us a little bit about where people can get in touch with you. What's Western Letting's plans for the future? Just carry on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we've got plans to. I've got targets. I've got a business coach, and they make you have targets. So our target for this year is to get to 735, and then next year's 950. I don't want to think too far past that. There is talk of scaling it by acquisition. We've got pretty novel systems. We use a thing called Asana, sort of workflow management that we've been using for 3 or 4 years now, and all our business basically runs on Asana now, and it's pretty slick. And I think that we could do that with another business. So there is talk of scaling, but it won't be for at least another 9 to 12 months. So that's the plans for the future. You want me to talk about
you can buy me out if you want to take over my business, mate, so I can go and get 3 months off.
A permanent holiday.
Aye. We can talk about that.
Aye. Right. Okay. Listen, Jack, we really appreciate your time. If anybody's looking for, to have the property managed, there are other letting agents out there as well. I myself, but obviously Jack's company, they've been going. I mean, you've stood the test of time. I mean, it's a pretty good indicator that you're still going in a successful business after 13 years. Do you know what I mean? So thanks for your time again, Jack. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Jack. Thank you. Right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jack Gallagher. Don't forget, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast platform. Tag us on social media, connect with us on Instagram, Facebook. And if you're wanting to get involved in property, you don't know where to start, why don't you come along to one of the Scottish Property Podcast live networking events on the first Wednesday of every month. in every city in Scotland, and they seem to be going well.
Absolutely loving it and looking forward to the next one. Brilliant. Thanks for listening, guys. Speak to you soon.